In the year 453, under a moonless sky on the banks of the Tisa River, Attila the Hun did not fall to the clash of swords or the fury of Roman steel. His death came quietly in the bridal chamber, blood spilling from his own body as his new wife slept beside him. The scourge of God, the king who shattered empires with a whisper of his name, met his end not in glory, but in a hemorrhage of the unseen, a ruptured vessel, ancient sources whisper, born of excess or poison or the weight of dominion itself. This was no battlefield epitaph. Attila's passing unveils a deeper shadow, the machinery of terror that sustained his realm, a system where fear was not chaos but architecture. Empires do not crumble from swords alone. They erode when obedience calcifies into silence. If you value the historical record, subscribe to Whispers of History. Consider this truth plainly. Power endures not through conquest, but through the invisible laws that bind men to their chains without the rattle of iron. Attila mastered this. His Hunnic horde was no rabble of barbarians. It was a state forged in the crucible of submission, where every tribe, every captive, every Roman envoy bent to a rhythm older than steel, the pulse of calculated dread. The tales endure because they mirror our own fragility. What force turns free men into instruments? What hidden levers lift a steppe warrior to the throne of half the world? These questions lingered even as his body cooled, drained not by enemies, but by the empire he had inhaled into himself. Born amid the endless grass seas north of the Black Sea, around the year 406, Attila entered a world where survival demanded ferocity, yet his origins whisper of something colder. The Huns were not born conquerors. They were refugees of forgotten wars, their faces scarred by tribal blades to mark loyalty or lineage. Young Attila grew in the shadow of his uncle Rua, king of a confederation stitched from terror and tribute. Horses thundered across plains where no plow ever turned soil. Tents rose and fell like breaths. Blood was the ink of their history. From his earliest days, the boy learned the first law of the steppe. Weakness invites the blade. Captured as a child by Romans during a raid, he dwelt in their palaces, tasting their wine and their deceit. Returned to his kin, he carried their scent, the marble polish of empire, masking the rot beneath. These years planted the seed. Power was not taken by force alone. It was administered like a slow poison in the cup. The Huns themselves were a mosaic of subjugated peoples, Alans, Gepids, Ostrogoths, each tribe yoked by fear of the horse archers who struck like wind. Attila watched as Rua enforced unity not through oaths but through hostages. Sons of chieftains slept in the royal camp, their lives the silent guarantors of their father's silence. One false move and heads rolled into the grass. This was the psychological forge of his youth, systems of dread that needed no walls. Yet even then, a mythic veil clung to him. Warriors whispered of his birth under a sword-shaped comet, a sign from the sky gods that he would carve the world anew. Such omens grounded him not in fantasy, but in the reverence they commanded. Tribes bowed deeper when leaders invoked the stars. Attila internalized this early. Legend was administration. To rule the Huns was to rule their beliefs first. He rode with Rua's riders, loosing arrows that drank blood at 100 paces. The composite bows, layered horn and sinew, hummed death across horizons. But Attila noted more than kills. He saw how Roman gold flowed into Hunnic coffers, tribute disguised as alliance. Envoys arrived with chests of silver, their smiles brittle as autumn reeds. Rua accepted, then demanded more. The pattern etched itself into the boy's mind. Empires paid to breathe. By his teens, Attila had killed his first man, a rival youth in a ritual duel, blood soaking the earth to seal a pact. The tribe feasted that night, meat roasting over steppe fires, mare's milk fermented into airag that burned the throat. Songs rose of ancestors unbroken. In that firelight, Attila glimpsed the fragility beneath the revelry. One weak harvest, one lost herd, and unity fractured. He vowed silently to build otherwise, not on herds alone, but on the certainty of pain withheld or unleashed. This origin was no mere cradle of violence. It was the cradle of philosophy. The steppe taught him that men follow strength, but endure systems. His uncle's court, a circle of felt tents ringed by skull-topped lancers, was tribunal and temple. Disputes ended in blood oaths or exile. Captives toiled unseen, their labor the unseen spine of the horde. Attila observed how Rua's word rippled outward, chieftains dispatching riders to collect tribute on schedule. Delay meant villagers burned, survivors branded as examples. The psychological weight settled early. Huns spoke of him as the born leader, his gaze steady as a falcon's, yet beneath lay calculation. He questioned elders on Roman treacheries, memorizing betrayals. The Eastern Emperor Theodosius paid yearly sums, 350 pounds of gold by treaty, enforced by the threat of invasion. Attila saw the truth. War was the shadow, gold the substance. Systems preceded the sword. In those formative years, as eagles wheeled overhead and wolves howled kinship, Attila absorbed the rhythm of dominion. Short sentences of command, pauses heavy with implication. The occasional rhetorical turn, who bends first, lives. Sensory echoes marked his path, the creak of leather saddles, the metallic tang of blood on wind, the low murmur of captives reciting fealty. No overload, only immersion. Yet a quiet unease shadowed his rise. Dreams, elders said, visited him, rivers of blood parting for a lone rider. He woke silent, pondering. Was this omen or warning? The steppe offered no answers, only expanse. Power, he concluded, was the horizon men chased until it broke them. He would not break. He would become the break. Reflect now on that child amid the grasses. What stirs in a boy when he first tastes the silence fear enforces? The Huns endured because one man's gaze made worlds submit. Attila carried this truth into manhood, a seed destined to bloom into empire, or its quiet undoing. In the shadow of his uncle Rua's death in 434, Attila did not seize the throne through blood-soaked ritual or the clamor of rival blades. Power ascended to him and his brother Bleda through the quiet machinery of succession, a pact sealed among chieftains who knew the cost of discord. The horde paused, tents clustered on the Danube's misty banks. As the brothers inherited a realm stitched from tribute and tremor, Rua's passing revealed no chaos, only continuation. The Huns had long transcended mere raiding. They were a confederation, vast as the steppes, sustained by Roman gold, 700 pounds annually by then, extracted through envoys who trembled under the weight of their own parchments. Attila observed how Bleda's coarser appetites masked the true levers. Treaties enforced by the spectre of horsemen who could blot the sun. Together they ruled. Bleda favored hunts and feasts. Attila, the ledgers. Roman diplomats arrived from both east and west. Theodosius II and Valentinian III, bearing silks and silver to avert the storm. The brothers demanded more, not conquest, but calibration. They restructured tribute into a system of scheduled payments, hostages as collateral, defection punished by the enslavement of entire clans. This was rise not through battles won, but through the architecture of dependence. The psychological bind tightened early. Tribes under Hunnic sway, Gepids, Ostrogoths, even Sarmatians, dispatched sons to the royal camp, their lives the unspoken currency of alliance. Attila walked among them at dawn, his presence a silent audit. One chieftain delayed tribute. His heir vanished into the grasslands, body returned weeks later, throat opened like a wineskin. No declaration of war, merely consequence administered as routine. By 440, tensions with the Eastern Empire sharpened. Theodosius withheld gold, claiming Hunnic raids on Illyricum. Attila responded not with hordes, but with precision. Envoys returned with ultimatums. Pay double, or face the river of skulls. When Theodosius demurred, Hunnic riders struck not Rome's heart, but its supply lines. Grain ships burned on the Danube. Merchants flayed alive as messengers. The emperor relented, payments resuming under stricter terms. This was governance through shadow. Attila reformed the horde structure, elevating loyalists to overseers who collected taxes from subjugated peoples. Villagers paid in cattle, grain, slaves. Tithes funneled to the center. Roman provincials, weary of imperial taxes, found Hunnic rule a heavier yoke, yet one enforced by horsemen who vanished like mist. Defiance meant ash. Compliance, survival. Bleda's end came in 445, shrouded in whisper. Ancient sources, Priscus, Jordanes, speak of a hunt where arrows flew true, or a feast where wine turned fatal. Poison, ambush. The truth dissolves in steppe wind, but the effect endured. Attila stood alone, sulking, his brother's corpse a foundation stone. No civil war erupted. Chieftains acclaimed him, for they had seen the alternative. Fracture invites Roman gold to exploit the seams. Now the ascent accelerated. He centralized authority, binding tribes through marriage alliances and ritual oaths sworn over ancestor skulls. The royal court migrated seasonally, a mobile capital of felt yurts, ringed by lances, where justice was dispensed with the curt snap of a whip. Captives from every corner, Goths, Romans, Alans, toiled in unseen labor, forging arrows, tanning hides, their output the sinew of expansion. Envoys multiplied. From Constantinople came Maximinus, bearing gifts that Attila inspected like a merchant, then spurned until terms bent. He demanded not mere gold, but recognition, the Huns as equals, their king as lord of the borderlands. Valentinian, in Ravenna, paid quietly. His sister Anaria later flung into the tale with a ring and plea for rescue, or so Attila claimed, twisting diplomacy into pretext. Through these systems, the horde swelled, not a nomadic swarm, but an empire of administration. Tribute networks spanned from the Rhine to the Caucasus. Collectors riding fixed circuits, returns audited by scribes, often literate Roman captives whose quills etched the realm's pulse. Raids punctuated, but served the machine. Captives swelled the labor pool, loot greased loyalty. Attila's gaze turned philosophical. Power was no flame to be fed endlessly. It was a web, spun patient, trapping fly and spider alike. He summoned Priscus, the historian, in 449, questioning Roman decadence amid goblets of unmixed wine. "Your cities crumble from within," he declared, voice steady as distant thunder. The envoy noted his court. Kings of vassal tribes in attendance, silenced by custom, their thrones mere stools before his. Sensory echoes marked this era, the low moan of steppe winds through lance forests, the wet suck of mud under hooves after rain, the acrid smoke of horse-dung fires where chieftains pledged fealty. Short commands punctuated councils: speak, pay, kneel. Pauses invited no rebellion, only reflection on the void of refusal. By 450, his realm peaked, a colossus astride Europe. The Eastern Empire ceded Pannonia, the West trembled. Yet this rise whispered disquiet. Systems demand sustenance. What happens when the web's master hungers beyond its strands? Attila pondered this amid his wives' tents, the weight of dominion settling like frost on iron. Reflect on the brothers' division, then union in death. One man now held the reins, not by divine right, but by the inexorable logic of fear organized. Empires rise when men forget their chains are self-forged. Attila ensured they remembered, quietly, relentlessly. Attila's law was no parchment scroll etched in Latin flourish. It was the curve of a bowstring, drawn taut until the world yielded or snapped. In his realm, justice flowed from the king's tent like blood from a fresh kill, swift, certain, final. No councils debated, no appeals lingered. A chieftain's theft of horses met the lash across his back, stripes counted like beads on a prayer string. one stripe per beast, transgression tallied in flesh. This code bound the horde's mosaic. Tribes from the Volga to the Rhine submitted to it, their elders reciting verdicts learned at Attila's knee. Roman captives, once judges in their marble courts, now scratched rulings on bark tablets, their quills guided by Hunnic overseers. Law became portable, etched in memory and fear. A widow's claim to grazing lands, settled by ordeal, her accuser holding a red-hot iron. Blisters proved guilt or innocence as surely as God's thunder. Yet depth lay beneath the blade's edge. Attila enforced not caprice, but equilibrium. The steppe demanded balance. Herds grazed common, waters shared, oaths unbroken. Violators fed the wolves, their bones heaped as signposts. Priscus the envoy witnessed one such tribunal in 449, amid the royal camp's smoke-wreathed circle. A Gothic noble, accused of withholding tribute, knelt silent as Attila weighed testimony. No rage erupted. The king nodded once. The man's tongue was severed that dusk, his screams muffled by rags. Speech, Attila decreed, was a privilege earned by truth. Philosophically, this was dominion's first pillar. Law stripped illusion. Romans cloaked cruelty in rhetoric. Huns bared it plain. Every sentence carried instruction. Obey the code, or become its example. Vassal kings dispatched riders monthly, reports sealed with blood oaths. Delay invited auditors, Attila's kinsmen, faces scarred like maps of past judgments. They arrived unannounced, tallied herds, slaves, gold. Shortfalls meant restitution in sons or daughters, yoked to the royal household until balance restored. Sensory weight grounded these rites. The metallic temps of heated iron in dawn air. The wet rip of hide parting under whips. The low murmur of witnesses reciting fealty, voices blending like wind through grass. Rhetorical pauses marked verdicts. Who claims right? Who bears false? Silence answered, heavy as unloosed arrows. No overload, only the steady drum of consequence. Even foreigners bowed to this order. Eastern envoys, haughty with imperial seals, found their protests dissolved in Hunnic custom. One ambassador, Nomus, argued treaty clauses in fluent Greek. Attila listened, then summoned the man's interpreter, a captive scribe, and had him flogged for mistranslation. Real or invented, the point endured. Words bent to the king's will. Law was not debate. It was decree, internalized until breath aligned with it. Reflect on this pillar's shadow. When justice becomes spectacle without mercy, obedience calcifies. Men no longer questioned right. They anticipated pain. Attila's realm hummed with this rhythm, disputes evaporating before they festered. Yet a quiet fracture whispered, what sustains a code built on fear alone? The king's tent loomed larger, its flaps stirring like lungs of judgment. Marriage among the Huns was no tender union of hearts. It was alliance forged in flesh and lineage, a chain linking tents across the plain. Attila gathered wives as a king gathers swords, each chosen for bloodlines that bound tribes closer. Krika, his chief consort, bore sons who would inherit the horde's fire. Others came as tribute, daughters of Gepids, Alans, even Roman provincials plucked from border villas. Their unions sealed pacts stronger than ink. Intimacy served the state. A chieftain's loyalty wavered. Offer his sister in wedlock, her tent pitched beside the king's. Refusal meant her kin scattered to the winds, branded as exiles. Priscus noted the royal household's expanse. Wives in silks bartered from Silk Road caravans, their laughter echoing through felt walls at feasts. Yet beneath lay calculation. Each marriage wove dependency, each child a hostage to ambition. This pillar delved deeper into the psyche of submission. Women moved not as chattel alone, but as bridges. A bride's arrival heralded feasts, where mare's milk flowed and songs praised enduring lines. Sensory threads bound them, the musk of oiled braids, the clink of bronze bracelets stamped with the Hun mark. The rhythmic chant of betrothal oaths over ancestor cups, Short vows sufficed. Blood joins blood. Break it, bleed. Philosophically stark, these bonds revealed empire's undercurrent. Love yielded to lineage, desire to dominion. Attila's own bedchamber, thick carpeted with Persian rugs, hosted not passion's chaos, but policy's right. Envoys departed with tales of his restraint, unmixed wine. Measured words yet whispers persisted, of nights where excess mirrored his appetites. His final bride, Ildiko, veiled in mystery, would later frame his end. Marriage, then, was no sanctuary. It was the throne's extension. Tribes internalized this. Lesser kings aped the right, wedding daughters to secure grazing rights or raid shares. The horde's fabric strengthened, threads of flesh pulling taut. Yet unease stirred, when intimacy becomes instrument, what remains private. The king's gaze pierced tents, ensuring no union escaped the greater weave. Bureaucracy in Attila's empire was no Roman scroll heap, but a living network of riders and runes. Scribes, often Greek or Latin captives, tallied tribute in the king's shadow. Wax tablets clicking like abacus beads. Monthly circuits dispatched overseers to vassal camps. Count herds, slaves, arrowheads. Returns flowed central, audited by firelight. Shortfalls noted in code. A slashed mark meaning retribution due. This machinery hummed unseen. Royal envoys, cloaked in fox fur, carried sealed cylinders of birch bark, decrees unrolled only by addressees. Defiance the rider vanished. A fresh band arrived at dawn, villages emptied of men. Priscus marveled at the precision. Huns, illiterate in script, mastered administration through trusted clerks whose lives hung on accuracy. One error, and the scribe joined the scollancy. Philosophical core. Order from chaos. The steppes flux, migrations, raids bent to schedule. Sensory pulse marked it. Hoofbeats signaling couriers. The crackle of wax seals broken. The murmur of tallies recited aloud for witnesses. Horses, 200. Gold, 50 pounds. Slaves, 12. Pauses invited correction. None came. Even justice fed the system. Verdicts logged, patterns discerned. Tribes prone to theft assigned extra overseers. Attila reviewed ledgers nightly, his finger tracing shortfalls like veins on a map. Bureaucracy was his eye, extended across horizons, ensuring the horde moved as one organism, pulse steady, insatiable. Attila's economy was no bazaar of haggling merchants, but a vast web of extraction spun from the steppes to the Mediterranean's edge. Tribute formed its golden vein, Roman gold. Yearly hauls swelling from 350 pounds under Rua to 2,100 by his peak. Chests dragged by oxen across the Danube's ford. Provinces bled. Illyricum, Thrace, even Gaul's fringes. Their governors dispatching caravans under white flags, escorted by Hunnic lancers whose bows hummed warning. This was calibrated plunder. Vassal tribes paid in kind. Gepids in cattle, Ostrogoths in grain, Alans in horses bred for wars, thunder. Raiders returned, not with chaos, but inventories. Slaves chained in tens, their worth tallied by age and strength. Roman captives, skilled in craft, forged the horde's arrowheads, their hammers echoing through camp like a blacksmith god's heartbeat. Loot funneled central, redistributed to loyal chieftains, binding them tighter than blood. Philosophically, wealth was dominion's breath. Attila shunned hoarding. Gold circulated as wages for warriors, bribes for spies in Constantinople's halls. Priscus beheld the royal tent's opulence in 449, silver plate from Persian wars, silks draping thrones of ivory inlaid wood. Yet the king drank from a wooden cup, signaling restraint amid excess. Riches bind men, he told the envoy, voice low as wind over graves. Lose them, and loyalty flees. Sensory anchors grounded it, the clink of coin sacks unloaded at dusk, the lowing of tribute herds under torchlight, the sharp scent of minted silver warmed by sun-baked palms. Slavery underpinned the machine, unseen labor the horde's marrow. Captives from every raid, Romans, Goths, Sarmatians, toiled in vast encampments, tanning hides into bow cases, smelting iron for lance tips, herding the endless horse trains. Women wove felt for tents, their looms clicking rhythmic as heartbeats. No chains clanked openly. Overseers' whips sufficed, lashes few but remembered. A slave's flight meant his village's kin yoked in his stead. Economy thrived on this calculus. One man's toil bought another's fealty. Towns rose under Hunnic sway, not marble citadels, but wooden stockades ringed by palisades. Margus Nasus markets, where tributes swapped for Roman wine, spices wafting on trade winds. Attila taxed passengers, a tenth of every herd, every cart. Defiance. The town burned, survivors sold south across the river. This was no primitive barter. It was empire's pulse, steady, insatiable, turning conquest's fury into coin's quiet gleam. Reflect on this pillar's weight. When wealth flows from broken backs and bent knees, prosperity whispers fragility. What happens when tributaries dry? Attila's tents brimmed, yet the horizon loomed empty. Gold bought swords, but not eternity. Religion among the Huns was no temples, incense, haze, but sky and blood entwined, shamans' chants rising over ancestor mounds. Attila stood as divine vessel, chosen by Tengri, the eternal blue heaven sword of Mars, plunged into the earth near his birth camp. Drawn by his father Munda, sign of celestial mandate, warriors knelt before it, offerings of horse blood staining the soil red. Shamans' faces tattooed with spirit tracks, divined through bones cast in firelight, their rattles shaking like distant thunder. Attila consulted them before raids, heeding omens, eagle flights for victory, wolf howls for caution. Christianity crept among captives, Gothic bishops like Ulfilas preaching intense, yet bent to Hunnic will. Converts paid double tribute, their crosses no shield against the king's gaze. Gods served the strong, Attila decreed, voice calm as stepped dawn. Philosophically profound, faith was fealty's cloak. The king mediated heaven and earth. Defiance blasphemed Tengri himself. Sacrifices marked pacts, a white stallion slain over treaties, its steaming liver read by priests. Sensory immersion sealed it, smoke curling thick from sacred pyres, the iron reek of blood on grass, chants droning hypnotic under star-pricked skies. Rhetorical silences invited awe. Does heaven speak? Listen, even Roman envoys bowed to rites. Priscus joined a feast where shamans invoked storm gods, drums pounding visceral. Attila watched, unmoved, his piety calculated temples raised in conquered lands, their gold melted for arrowheads. Religion unified the horde's mosaic, tribes from Scythian east to Germanic west chanting one Sky Father's name. Yet whispers persisted, a Christian slave's prayer blamed for a failed harvest, his tongue silenced by ordeal. This pillar endured because belief outlasted steel. Men fought for gods who promised plunder, endured for spirits who cursed rebellion. Attila wielded it masterfully, his divinity no boast, but the horde's unspoken creed. Slavery formed the unseen marrow of Attila's dominion, a vast undercurrent of toil that pulsed beneath the thunder of hooves and the gleam of tribute gold. Captives from every shadowed raid, Romans torn from Thracian villas, Goths chained from Danube, strongholds, Sarmatians yoked from Caspian fringes, swelled the horde's ranks, their sweat forging the empire's sinew. No iron manacles clanked in the open air. The whip's shadow sufficed, its cracker language all understood. These unseen laborers toiled in sprawling encampments that sprawled like wounds across the plains, tanning endless hides into bow cases supple as serpent skin, smelting iron into lance points that drank light, herding the ceaseless horse trains whose milk and meat sustained the host. Women captives wove felt for the yurt walls that housed kings, their looms whispering rhythmic through smoke-filled nights. Overseers scarred Huns, risen from the same dust, tallied output by firelight. Shortfalls met with the measured lash, one stripe per missing quiverful, flight invited, darker harvest. The fugitives can dragged forth, their villages' hearths, cold ash by dawn. Philosophically stark, this pillar revealed empire's quiet truth. Grandeur rests on broken backs, prosperity on the silenced groan. Attila calibrated it precisely, assigning Romans to scribe ledgers, their Latin quills etching tallies of slave yield, while Gothic smiths hammered arrowheads, each blow a confession of subjugation. Priscus glimpsed this world in 59, noting how captives' eyes darted like trapped wolves, yet hands moved ceaseless, driven by the calculus of survival. One man's labor bought his child's breath, another's a chieftain's feel. Sensory threads bound the machine, the acrid bite of tanning vats steaming under midday sun, the rhythmic clang of hammers on anvils blending with distant horse whinnies, the low murmur of overseers' counts hides, 50 arrows, 2,000, punctuated by pauses heavy as unstruck blows. Rhetorical weight lingered. Who builds the bow that breaks worlds? The hand that holds it not. No excess, only the steady grind of human gears turning conquest's wheel. Tribes aped the right, their own slaves swelling from raid spoil, labor networks mirroring the king's. Even Roman provincials, bled dry by imperial tax, found Hunnic chains heavier yet familiar. At least the lash came with gruel, not rhetoric. This economy of flesh endured because it promised order, toil for breath, silence for mercy. Yet beneath pulsed disquiet. What weight do empires bear when founded on the weight of others? Fear served Attila not as wildstorm, but as administration's steady rain, soaking the soil until obedience rooted deep. It began in the royal camp, where chieftains' sons slept as hostages, their soft breaths the guarantors of distant loyalty. One father's delay in tribute, and a throat opened quiet at dawn, body returned, lashed to a pony. Message plain fealty breathes, or it does not. This machinery extended tendrils across the realm. Riders patrolled circuits, faces hooded whispers of audits preceding them like thunder's rumble. Villages straightened under their gaze, herds tallied flawless, granaries brimmed, defiance withered unspoken. A headman's glance too bold, and his tent vanished by nightfall. Survivors branded with the Hun mark, living warnings etched in scar. Priscus chronicled the chill envoys from Theodosius trembled not before swords. But the king's unmoving stare pauses, stretching until will cracked. Philosophically profound, fear was the invisible scaffold. It needed no garrisons. Rumor sufficed. Tales rippled. The Gepid who haggled tribute, found flayed across his own threshold. The Alan spy, eyes burned for seeing too much. Sensory anchors fixed it. The hush falling as a rider approached, hoofbeats slowing to dread's cadence. The metallic whisper of knives sharpened by firelight. Chants of warning songs around evening fires, bend or break unseen. Short queries, pierced counsels, who falters? Speak now. Even the horde internalized it. Warriors checked reins before raids, lest a stray arrow invite reprisal. Vassal kings dispatched monthly oaths, sealed in blood, their couriers kneeling silent. Attila wielded it masterfully, alternating terrors, lash with calculated calm, pardons for the abject, amplifying dread's potency. Fear governed because it governed within. Men policed themselves, chains forged of foresight. Reflect on this pillar's shadow. When dread becomes daily bread, rebellion starves. The steppe lay still under its blanket, yet roots stirred restless. What empire stands when fear's harvest yields only hollow men? Spectacle governed Attila's realm not as fleeting revelry, but as the empire's beating heart, a grand theatre where submission masqueraded as glory. Vast encampments swelled into temporary cities, for his decrees felt yachts ringed by skull-tucked lances, transforming into arenas under starlit vaults. Chieftains gathered by the 1,000 vassal kings on lowered thrones, their eyes fixed on the royal dais where Attila sat unmoved, a living idol amid the haze of roasting horseflesh. Feasts marked the rhythm, not indulgence alone, but ritual instruction. Mare's milk fermented into airag, flowed from silver-rimmed horns passed hand to hand, binding drinkers in silent pact. Bards chanted epics of ancestors unbroken, voices droning hypnotic over crackling pyres, while tumblers on horseback loosed arrows blindfolded, shafts whispering death inches from awed faces. One miss and the rider's life ended, their spectacle demanding perfection as life demanded obedience. Philosophically stark, this pillar fused awe with admonition. Priscus witnessed the 449 embassy feast. Tables groaned under Roman tribute, pheasants plucked golden, Persian peaches bursting juice. Yet Attila drank plain water, his restraint a mirror shaming excess. Envoys stumbled through toasts. He paused, gaze level. Praise hollows without deed. The air thickened, laughter choked to coughs. Sensory immersion sealed it. Smoke stinging eyes like unshed tears. The wet snap of marrow bones cracked for sharing, drums pounding visceral under moonrise. Public judgments amplified the rite. A traitor's trial unfolded mid-banquet, bound before the assembly. He confessed under shaman's rattle, then met the bowstring garrote, body dragged to blaze as example. Cheers rose mechanical, faces painted with feigned zeal. Vassals learned swift, acclaim the king's will, or join the pyre. Raids returned with captive parades, Romans in rags stumbling chains, forced to kneel and recite Hunnic supremacy before feasts commenced. Triumph was theatre, humiliation its applause. Even diplomacy bent to stagecraft. Theodosius' ambassadors arrived to swelling horns, herded through honor guards, whose scars gleamed oiled. Attila received them perched high, silent stretching until knees buckled. Terms dictated amid mock hunts, arrows felling stags as ultimatums fell. Gold flows, or blood mirrors it. Spectacle unified the horde's fractures. Goths, Alans, Gepids, chanting as one, their rivalries drowned in collective roar. Rhetorical pauses punctuated peaks. Who sees the arrow's path? Who dares its miss? No frenzy, calm escalation, building dread's gravity. This governance endured because it infected the soul. Men craved the next rite, its terror laced with belonging. Yet shadows lengthened. When applause becomes compulsion, what stirs beneath the cheer? These pillars, law's blade, marriage's chain, bureaucracies, quill, economy's vein, religion's chant, slavery's grind, fear's whisper, spectacles roar, stood interlocked, a colossus astride the world. Attila's system hummed flawless through 450, tribute swelling coffers, tribes yoked, unbreaking. The Eastern Empire ceded Nasus. The West quailed at Catalonian whispers. His court pulsed with envoys, shamans, scribes. The steppes' expanse bent inward to one will. Yet exhaustion crept unseen, like frost claiming iron. Tribute circuits stretched thin. Vassals chafed under endless levy, their herds leaner, sons fewer. Roman gold bought loyalty, but not eternity. Theodosius' death in 450 shifted winds. Marcian withholding payments, veiled as piety. Attila demanded, silence answered. Raids yielded diminishing spoil, captives' toil slackening as resentment fermented. The horde's vastness, one's strength, bred seams, distant tribes murmuring of old gods, old freedoms. Philosophically ominous, systems devour their sustenance. Marriage alliances frayed as sons eyed thrones. Bureaucracy drowned in tallies of shortfall. Fear ossified into ritual, losing edge. Spectacle paled when stomachs growled through feasts. Priscus noted the shift. Attila's gaze hardened, unmixed wine tasting bitter. He launched deeper thrusts. Gaul ravaged Orleans' gates, Itius shadowed by Hunnic shadow. Victory at Chalons Fields in 451 checked him. Not defeat, but attrition's bite. Sensory harbingers marked decay, fewer herds lowing at tribute fords. Shaman's bones casting ill winds, the hush of camps lengthening into doubt. Overseers whipped harder, riders returned empty-handed. The machine groaned, gears of flesh and fealty grinding slower. Attila sensed it, doubling spectacle, grander hunts, bloodier oaths, yet the web trembled. What force sustains when pillars lean? Reflect on this quiet fracture. Empires peak not in roar, but in the pause before unravel. Attila's colossus, forged in genius, whispered its own mortality. Attila's downfall unfolded not in the clash of Catalonian fields or the roar of vengeful legions, but in the quiet erosion of his own edifice, a bureaucratic unraveling as methodical as the tribute ledgers he once audited. By 452, the systems seems parted silently. Marsign's envoys ceased gold shipments, citing piety over peril. Attila's riders returned with empty scrolls, their faces etched with the chill of unanswered demands. No grand rebellion ignited, merely absence, the slow bleed of revenue that starved the machine. Vassal tribes stirred first in whispers, then in withheld herds. Gepids under Arderic hoarded grain. Ostrogoths delayed sons for the royal camp. Overseers dispatched to enforce found villages emptied, fires cold, only wind sighing through abandoned yurts. Attila summoned councils, his voice steady as ever. Who falters? Speak plain. Silence answered, thicker than steppe fog. He doubled lash quotas, yet the calculus shifted, fear calcified into resentment. Whips drawing blood that no longer bought obedience. Philosophically inexorable, exhaustion claimed what swords spared. Marriage bonds frayed as allied widows reclaimed grazing lands. Shamans cast bones portending eclipse, their chants hollow under leaden skies. Bureaucracy choked on backlogged tallies, Roman scribes feigning illness, their quills idle, spectacles dimmed feasts, leaner, tumblers, faltering mid-lep, applause thinning to coughs. Gauls' plunder yielded scant slaves. The labor pools shrank, arrow forges cooling to rust. Sensory omens mounted, the diminished low of tribute oxen at Danube fords, the acrid bite of unburned pyres where sacrifices once smoked, the elongated hush of royal audiences where once commands snapped like reins. Attila walked his camp at dusk, shadow lengthening, pondering the void. Empires breathe on men's breath, he murmured to a lone rider. When it stills, what remains? No rage, only the weight of dominion turning inward. Bureaucratic rigor sealed the slide. A final audit revealed shortfalls, cascading Alans, 10% under levy, Sarmatians fleeing east. He decreed purges. Disloyal overseers, garroted mid-count, their ledgers burned as caution. Yet the purge birthed fractures, kin of the fallen road, vengeful, raiding supply trains. The horde, once monolith, splintered into feuds no spectacle could mend. Prisca's last tales speak of envoys rebuffed, Roman walls unbreached, the king's tent isolated amid growing doubt. This was collapse symbolic, not cataclysmic. Law's blade dulled without victims to judge. Religion's chants faltered as Tengri seemed deaf. Attila turned inward, wedding Ildiko in 453, a Germanic bride, veil shimmering like false dawn, seeking fresh alliance through flesh. The ceremony droned ritual, oaths over skullcups, drums subdued. Feasts followed, airag flowing free, masking the tremor beneath. Yet in that bridal yurt, as laughter echoed faint outside, the system exhaled its last. Blood seeped unseen, no poisoner's hand. Number blade's mercy, merely the body yielding to excess's toll, or heaven's quiet verdict. Bureaucracy endured one final rite, scribes logging the king's passing come dawn, voice calm, impersonal. No panic swelled, chieftains gathered, sons acclaimed in orderly succession. The colossus knelt not to steal, but to its own hollow core. Reflect on this bureaucratic twilight. When pillars stand too long unyielding, they crumble from within. Attila's end whispered the truth. Dominion's silence is deadliest when self-imposed. In the hush following Attila's passing, the royal camp stirred, not with wails or war cries, but with the measured murmur of succession's machinery. Dawn light filtered through felt flaps as his sons, Eloch, Dengizik, Ernak, gathered chieftains in the bloodied bridal yurt. Body-shrouded plain on a hide pallet, no golden beer. Shamans chanted low over the sword of Tengri, invoking ancestral shades to bless the divide. No single heir rose. The empire fractured along bloodlines, each son claiming a third. Ilok the east, Dengizik the south, Ernok the young west. Vassal tribes watched, calculating. Gepids under Ardaric withheld oaths, their herds grazing unlevied. Ostrogoths slipped Roman envoys gold for sanctuary. Bureaucratic remnants, rider circuits, tribute ledgers, sputtered, then stilled, quills idle as ink dried. Roman scouts reported the horde's dispersal, tents folding eastward, horses scattering like spilled seed. Marcian dispatched cautious tribute, not to one king, but scattered pouches, buying time with coins whisper. Philosophically measured, the aftermath revealed fragility's truth. Pillars endured briefly. Laws, remnants, judged minor thefts. Fear's echo quelled early raids. Yet without the center's gaze, they toppled. Elok marched on the Akaziri, seeking glory's glue. Defeat came swift at the Volga's bend, his bones left for crows. Dengizik raided Thrace, arrows glancing off Roman walls, stiffened by Itius' shade. Ernak faded into Carpathian mists, his fragment dissolving unremarked. Sensory echoes marked the ebb, the diminished thunder of hooves receding, pyres smoking faint where feasts once blazed, the wind-whipped silence of scullences toppling untended. Priscus chronicles note envoys traversing empty plains, once thronged fords barren. Western Emperor Valentinian breathed freer, Honorius Ringtail dismissed a steppe fable. The Eastern court rebuilt Nasus, stone by stone, markets stirring anew under imperial eagle. Yet deeper currents lingered. Gothic kingdoms rose from Hunnic, Ashvalima's Ostrogoths, claiming Italy's fringes. Their blood mingled with conquerors. Slavic whispers filled the vacuum, tribes creeping from forests. The horde's mosaic shattered true, Alan's east, Rugai west, each reverting to old gods, old feuds. Attila's wives dispersed, Krika to Kintents, Ildico veiled in rumor, her silence the final hostage taken. This dissolution reflected calm inevitability. Systems demand eternal vigilance. Mortality denies it. Sons ward kin in 454, Ardaric's Gepids crushing Elok at Nadau's bloody ford. The horde's spine snapped. Survivors fled, some to Rome's service as foederati bows, now guarding the empire they once bled. Others melted into steppe anonymity, legends hardening around campfires. The scourge who broke worlds, undone by night's quiet leak. Reflect on this measured close. When one man's shadow lifts, light reveals the dust of dominion. Attila's realm, vast as yesterday's storm, yielded to tomorrow's grass. After Attila's shadow lifted from the plains, Europe exhaled into a fragile dawn. Borders redrawn not by treaties grand, but by the quiet migration of survivors and the rust of abandoned lances. The Gepids, under Ardaric, claimed the Carpathian heartlands. Their victory at Nadau's ford in 454 a measured triumph, bodies heaped modest as steppe graves, no monuments raised. Ostrogoths under Valamor pressed into Pannonia, forging a kingdom from Hunnic remnants, their bows now guarding rather than breaking Roman gates. Alans scattered eastward, whispers of old shaman rites stirring in Caspian winds. The Eastern Empire under Marcian rebuilt methodically, Nasus walls restrung with fresh stone, markets humming once more under imperial seals, tribute reversed into cautious alliances with fragmented tribes. Valentinian III in Ravenna dismissed Honorius' ring as faded intrigue, his legions patrolling Rhine watchers unmolested. Gothic bishop Ulfilas spread Arian creed among the debris, Bibles etched in silver runes, blending Tengri's sky with Christ's cross in uneasy truce. Slavic kin crept from northern woods, tilling soils the Huns had scorched, their songs unscarred by conquest's scar. Philosophically reflective, this aftermath unveiled empire's echo, What shatters worlds leaves fertile dust. Attila's sons faded into legend's margin. Dengisic's head on a Thracian pike by 469. Ernuk's line dissolving unchronicled. Captive laborers, once hoard spine, dispersed as freedmen or foederati, their hammers now forging Roman plowshares. Sensory residues lingered, faint hoof tracks fading in rain-soaked grass. Pyrash fertilizing new pastures, the wind's low keen carrying no more Scourge's name. Priscus scrolls, gathered in Constantinople's scriptoria, preserved the right envoys, tales of felt tents and unmixed wine, hardening into cautionary verse. Poets like Sidonius Apollinaris mused on the terror quelled, their Latin measured, relieved. The Mediterranean stirred anew, aqueducts repaired, forums crowded, as if the Hun storm had pruned the old growth, yielding space for Byzantine bloom and Germanic seed. Yet beneath renewal pulsed disquiet. Roman decadence, once mocked by Attila's gaze, persisted. Emperors hoarded gold the Huns once claimed. Tribes aped the lost systems. Laws lash, fears whisper in smaller realms. The world turned, graves anonymous, save one, the Tisus bank, where reeds whispered of a king undone by night's quiet seep. Reflect on this measured rebirth. When colossi fall, the earth reclaims without judgment, cycles turning as inexorable as breath withdrawn. Attila's end whispers across millennia, a shadow cast long from the Tisus banks into our own fractured age. His death, blood pooling silent as he lay beside Ildico, no battle cry, no enemies. Steel unveils the eternal machinery. Empires thrive, not on swords alone, but on the unseen pillars of submission that hollow men from within. Law bends to whim, marriage chains blood to throne, bureaucracy tallies souls. As coin, these levers turn, today as then. In boardrooms and borders, where fear wears suits and spectacle streams, endless, consider the presence echo. Nations extract tribute not in gold chests, but digital streams. Vassals nodding compliance under algorithmic gaze. Intimacy twists into alliance. Data harvested like slaves in unseen forges. Religion repackaged as brand. Fear administered in whispers of cancellation or audit. Bureaucracies sprawl vast. Spectacles govern screens. Cheers, mechanical obedience, viral. What Attila forged in felt tents. Modernity perfects in glass towers. Dominion disguised as progress, its pulse steady, hypnotic. Philosophically unyielding, this warning endures. Power exhausts when pillars lean, exhaustion not of flesh, but faith. Systems demand eternity, mortality denies. Vassals fracture when the center bleeds unseen. Sons squabble over hollow thrones. The horde disperses into myth. Yet the cycle breathes, new scourges rise, cloaked in rhetoric, their bridal chambers waiting. Sensory ghosts persist, the hush of emptied plains, the faint clink of forgotten coin, wind sighing over scullences toppled. Rhetorical shadow falls final, who rules when fear becomes air, who kneels when spectacle blinds. Empires crumble not in roar, but unraveling thread by thread, until the webmasters, the spider. Attila knew this, tasted it in his last breath. The steppe reclaims all, grass over graves. But the machinery hums eternal, waiting for the next hand to draw the bowstring taut. Reflect on this universal grave. When one man's system swallows worlds, its echo devours the hand that built it. History's whisper endures, bend early or break unseen. The horizon waits patient as blood on linen.